Hello and welcome to the Hook Shot on the Miracle Sports Network. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Nate. Today, we're going to recap pretty much what's happened in this last week. There have been a few trades. This is all post draft. So, this is pretty much all of free agency. And we'll just go over some of these signings and just overall moves these teams have made and what impact they'll have.
Yeah, on a side note today, we're recording this on the 25th, and today college basketball is starting. So it's kind of the start of watching players to see who the best draft prospects are. And we probably won't follow any of that anytime soon, quite yet. But for basketball fans out there, today is a fun and exciting day.
Yeah, so getting to these teams, I guess the first team I don't want to talk about here is the Atlanta Hawks because I think the Hawks have probably had the most intriguing offseason so far. I think what the Hawks have really tried to do here is they realize they have a star in Trae Young on a rookie deal. So they're just trying to maximize all that contract space they have. So they went out and signed Danilo Gallinari to a big deal. And just this morning, the Kings decided not to match their offer sheets for Bogdan Bogdanovic, which means he's now on the Hawks as well. And I think the Hawks are probably the most improved team from this entire offseason. I still have a few questions about you have Clint Capella, who hasn't really played for them yet. They got the trade deadline last year, and John Collins. But in this current league and what he's been playing for those last few years, Daniel Gallinari is kind of a power forward, but you already have John Collins and Clint Capella back there, where that might be a big lineup. Although on the offside there, I think with looking at some of these other guys they have in their team, guys like Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter, who they drafted top 10 last year, they certainly have some flexibility to match up with a lot of teams where they can play small or they can play big. They me personally too, I was really hoping they would take in Tyrese Halliburton in the draft. I think he'd have been a really good fit because he's a guy who could maybe start backing up Trae Young, or he can maybe grow and play next to Trae Young. But they got a guy who is, as of right now, much better in Bogdanovic, and they got some really good guys to back him up there. They got Rajon Rondo, who really came alive for the Lakers in the playoffs this last year, and Chris Dunn, who I don't really think Chris Dunn has a lot of great point guard skills, but he is
He
one
can
of the
play
most
defense.
yeah,
He's one
he's
of the
one of the
best
most elite
defenders.
defenders in the league. And to pair that against with one of the worst defensive players in the league in Trae Young, that is certainly a big plus in my eyes. So I really like what the Hawks have done this offseason, and I think they will be much improved.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I think it helps a lot to have, the amount of elite offensive players that the Hawks have right now, for sure. And all their guys are pretty young. Trae Young, 22, DeAndre Hunter, 22, Cam Reddish, 21, John Collins, 23, and I guess Clint Capella is probably the old starter-ish player at 26. So then just to add your team with
Mm,
all these veterans, I guess Gallinari is going to start now,
yeah.
but Gallinari is going to be good for probably 16 to 18 points a game, I would assume, and is smart enough and isn't going to like mess things up for your team. Kevin Herter's still there. He's 22. Rondo, regular season Rondo is sometimes a mixed bag. I just have that veteran presence there at 34, bringing in an elite defensive player and Chris Dunn. Bogdan Bogdanovic, I guess he's also going to start.
Yeah.
Team is loaded. Wow, looking at him now, yeah.
I mean, they have an elite shooter back him up to Kevin Herter. I mean, Cam Reddish
Yeah,
shows a lot of potential. DeAndre Hunter had a rough year, but he's coming to his
he's
second
only
year.
22,
He was
so
just the 4th overall pick.
right.
And I think Bogdanovich is really a guy who is underrated. I mean, he hasn't been in the league that long because he came over pretty old, but I mean, he's still not that old. He's only 28 now, but it's not like he's coming in as like a 19-year-old guy like some other guys from the draft. But I mean, just he is incredibly accomplished in his career. Uh, he's he's on the EuroLeague all-decade team from 2010 to 2020. He's a EuroLeague champion. Uh, that year he won, he was the top scorer in the finals. He was on the All EuroLeague first team. He was a two-time EuroLeague Rising Star. He's a two-time Turkish League champion, and he just has so many awards throughout the second best league in the world in the EuroLeague, and Turkish leagues and Serbian leagues, and he's just in his prime right now at 28. I think he's incredibly underrated and a fantastic guy to pair alongside Trae Young.
Yeah, I mean, this team, especially in offense, they like have it all. They will lead shooters. Trey Young's a great shooter. Molinari can shoot. Bogdanovich can shoot. John Collins can shoot a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah. He had a really nice
Yeah.
year shooting.
Um, oh yeah, 40% from three last season. He can definitely shoot. And then I mean, you have Kevin Herter off the bench. Cam Reddish is a little bit of a scorer potentially.
And they got
Um,
Onyeka Okongwu with the 6th
they've been coming
pick,
off the bench. Yeah, Onyeka
which
Kongu can definitely play some
I'm
good
thinking
defense, dunker role.
I think
Um,
that's also great because it gives them a option to start in the future if they
yeah,
would maybe move on from a guy like Capella. And Okongwu, I think, is pretty NBA ready and will be able to come in and give some solid minutes, but also not having him thrusted into a role he might not be ready for is gonna be great for him.
and I think the pairing of Trae Young, Clint Capella can have an elite pick and roll option as well. Um,
Mhm.
so I mean, they can just run a pick and roll with those two guys. Maybe, and there's just so
And
many
they
options. If they have defenders closing in the lane, they have plenty of wing players to pass it out to. I mean, Clint Capella is a great pick and roll post player. John Collins is there. Trae Young can just go around the screen, shoot a three, be shifty, finish in the pick and roll. I think I think it'll take some time for this team to gel a little bit. Um,
Yeah, I could see that.
just with the amount of turnover and the very limited offseason. So I mean, they could easily be like, I mean, they're in the East. The East is pretty weak. So I mean, they could really end up maybe a 6 seed,
I
6 or 7 seed maybe, and um, kind of pick it up in the playoffs, kind of like Miami, I guess. Um,
Yeah, they're definitely a hard team to project because
yeah,
of
they really are.
I mean, they're so young, and you're giving all those guys another year to develop. Like, we saw that jump Trae Young made from his 1st and 2nd year,
Right.
but now you're adding in a whole bunch of extra pieces, plus Clint Capella's getting added in because he was hurt, so he never really played for them, and so you gotta include him as well in what you're adding, and it's a completely different team, and I think there's going to be a lot of high expectations for him with some of these moves.
I think it's a playoff team for sure.
Yeah, I don't
I
see a
mean
world
that
where this team doesn't make the playoffs.
no, that 8 seed's pretty easy to get relatively, and especially with the 7 through 10 seed play-in tournament. There's no way they're not finishing in the top 10 seeds.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the, I think sixth. They'd be happy with sixth for sure. I'm just looking at Milwaukee, Toronto, Boston, Miami, Brooklyn. those teams are for sure all up there. Then you still have Philadelphia, who, I mean, they should be a really good team as well. Indiana could
Toronto,
be a question mark
projected
depending what they
team.
do with some of their players.
Washington's got John Wall coming back.
Washington could be better, but I don't I don't think that's that changing for Washington. But yeah, they should be I think they'll be a playoff team for sure. Their defense should improve, I think,
Yeah.
bringing in the players they did. But yeah, this is a very deep roster. I mean, they've got at least 10 or 11 guys who can play quality minutes on several teams, I think. So that probably sets them up better for success in the playoffs and than the regular season. Just acknowledging all of the big contract extensions that have happened. I mean, I think all of them were expected. What was it? Brandon Ingram, Bam Adebayo, and
Donovan
Donovan
Mitchell.
Mitchell all getting max contracts for their respective teams. I think is definitely to note.
I don't really disagree with
The
any of those
oh no,
either.
none of them really surprised me. Um, yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, all those players are probably the best players in their team. So, and they're all
Hmm.
up and coming type players. Unless Zion decides to be really good and is better than Brandon Ingram, but I kind of don't see that happening. I guess the Lakers honestly stood out to me of teams. They re-signed Markeith. They just signed Marc Gasol the other day for a really cheap deal. Um, I think that was a really underrated signing personally. KCP came back. They got Montrezl Harrell, six man of the year. Wes Matthews. Uh, I think they're for sure better than last season. And I mean, they won the finals. So for them to get better, I think stands out the most to me. I guess they lost Rondo and Avery Bradley and Dwight Howard, I guess. But
Yeah,
Rondo's
I
the big
mean,
one they
I
lost there. But
I think they got better for sure. I can't completely say I exactly love everything though. I think the biggest move here is probably Montrezl Harrell. With the way the league's moving, that was noted in the playoffs where they had some of those nice like rim running centers like JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard start to get less and less minutes in the playoffs because they couldn't stretch the floor and there came issues. Montrezl Harrell's not a guy who can stretch the floor either, which is my big concern there. But a guy like Marc Gasol is, and which is why I think if they won't put Anthony Davis at center, which I don't think they're going to do still,
no,
I I would picture it'd be Davis and Gasol out there, and Gasol is their best shooting big man that they had between this like last season and this season. But I'm I'm also just really torn on Montrezl Harrell. I think he's at the same time, I think he's both incredibly overrated and underrated, which is partially, I guess, why I struggle with him so much. There's a lot of things he does that I think are really good and impactful and underrated, but there's also a lot of things he does that are just not great and incredibly overrated. But I don't think anyone can complain about the contract here. It's a fantastic deal for him. He's I think he's certainly going to come in and be better than McGee and Howard. Plus, you had Gasol, who's able to stretch the floor more. I see a lot of people saying that Wes Matthews is just exactly what you're getting from Danny Green. I think Danny Green's still much better than Matthews. I know Danny Green struggled in the playoffs for the Lakers, but Wes Matthews still does add stuff, and Dennis Schroeder is a really big addition for them, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they'll have probably their starters, their first team, kind of the players you said, and then have kind of a very different play style on their second team. Some of these players, I guess I just see like, I mean, their starters playing kind of an older, more traditional style of basketball a little bit, of just bullying people and
I mean, it's a lot of LeBron and Davis, your
yeah, I
starters.
mean that's a lot of liberty. That's just kind of how they play. Um, but then also with just Marcus Gasol, I think yeah, it'll be a combination of like bullying players and shooting the three. I think, kind of what they did last season. While the second team could really play very differently, I think. And Montrezl Harrell's a pretty high energy player. Wes Matthews can definitely bring a little bit of energy. I'm not sure what Schroeder would do if he is he likely going to start? Probably.
I don't know who would start over him, really.
Yeah,
I mean, you could just think because he's coming off the bench last year in Oklahoma City, but I mean, they had Chris Paul starting.
right. I just I don't know. Their starting lineup's a little tricky to figure out. Um, Whether they kind of just use like LeBron as the main point guard and start a guy like Caldwell Pope over Shooter and have Shooter like run the second team and play a lot of minutes, probably more than KCP, but just kind of like keep the two teams separately. So I kind of like Schroeder a little bit more on like the faster up tempo players than KCP necessarily. They just have a lot of quality players, I think, and
Yeah.
I mean finding someone to LeBron isn't always the easiest player to get people around him. Like he likes very specific type players, and some of these players they got are just to me feel a little different than your normal LeBron type players, which makes me wonder if they might do like very two different play styles for their teams, which would be very unique.
Well, moving on from that, I think there's a lot of big contracts signed this year that were pretty shocking that I think are worth mentioning here. I mean, Gallinari, we covered a little, 3 years, 61.5 million from Atlanta.
To be as old as he is and get that kind
Yeah,
of money, that's a lot. Malik Beasley,
I think
4
it's gonna
years,
be good.
60,
hmm Jeremy Grant got 3 years, 60
a
from
lot.
Detroit. Marcus
Um,
Morris, 4 years, 64 million from the Clippers, and that's a move I really don't like. There, I think more.
it's a lot of
I
money.
don't really think Morris adds a whole lot, and I don't. That's not really the proper way to phrase that. He doesn't really have anything that he's really good at. He's just he's just solid at a lot of different things, but it's not like he's an elite shooter like these guys, or he's an elite defender or stuff.
Nothing I would value at 16 million a year.
He's 31. That contract's gonna go for the next 4 years. It's not a contract I'm a big fan of at all.
Fred
But
Van Vliet, 4 years, 85,
hmm
85 for him. And then,
and
I mean,
the
Caldwell
big
Pope,
one,
even 3 years, 40 is kind of a lot for him, I thought.
yeah.
Um,
I don't feel as
and
bad at
then,
that one though. I guess because he was a big part for that championship winning
yeah,
team,
probably gets a little
and
pay
yeah,
boost for that. Gordon
I
Hayward to
mean,
the Hornets, 4 years, $120 million.
I mean, first of all, I was shocked that he declined his $34 million player option. Um, I I didn't think he'd get that kind of money in the open market. I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of questions around Gordon Hayward where I mean, he signed a big deal with the Celtics. he's gonna come and be their star player right after he made his All-Star year with Utah, signing with his college coach and everything. And his first game back, he breaks his leg in a really tragic injury. He's out for the year. And I mean, he's coming back. He hasn't quite had the performance that he's had in Utah, but I mean, you look at his team, he has so many guys there with Kemba, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. There's a lot of guys there who have a lot of usage on offense.
Right,
It's
he's
not
like
really
the 4th
surprising.
option there.
Yeah, it's not really surprising that he's not really scoring quite as much, where I don't exactly know what to expect from him. I Will he be closer to that All-Star player he was with Utah? I mean, I think he's definitely going to have a bigger role and more usage with the Hornets. And it's clearly a lot of money and a big investment, but I really don't hate it. Um, I really like what Charlotte's building there, and this they've been going through a rebuild for a while now, and I feel like the whole time that's what I mean. Just clearly, I guess, especially after Kemba left, they really started getting some more pieces where I mean, Devontae Graham kind of broke out. PJ Washington had one of the better rookie years last year, and they had a lot of really promising young guys, but they just don't have a guy who can come in and be that star. And I think Gordon Hayward has a big shot at doing that. And and then you factor in just Devontae Graham having seen if he can take another step forward. PJ Washington going to his second year, and there's usually a pretty solid jump up from your first year to your second year. And then clearly LaMelo Ball coming in from the draft, where LaMelo Ball is he's just a big wild card. Like no one knows what he's going to be really. I think this is easily probably one of the most intriguing teams and the most entertaining teams to watch for me this upcoming season.
I honestly really disagree. I hate this contract and the signing so much. Um, we haven't seen Gordon Hayward be good in like 3 years. He's had countless injuries. It feels like every time he had the horrible one, obviously his first game in Boston, and then he came back, took a really long time to get back, finally started playing well for like 2 weeks, and got hurt again. Kinda the same thing this season, was kinda a little slow, better than the year before, but just kept getting injured and injured and injured, and it was never reliable. So for Charlotte, I figured Gordon Hayward, the only way he's opting out is if he gets some, like, guaranteed money long term, because he's always so injured, and, if he did, like, one of these prove it deals or, like, stay for the next year and go to free agency in a huge free agent class where he will be buried under a lot of people, uh, I mean, he wouldn't get paid anything at all. So I thought, well, if he opts out, he's probably gonna get 4 years, somewhere between, like, 85 and 95, which is still personally probably more than I would give him, but he would probably get somewhere in there, I thought. But to pay him 4 years, 120,000,000, 30,000,000 a year just seems ridiculous to me. I mean, last season he scored 17.5 points a game, which is, like, decent, pretty solid. Um,
Because I mean, his shooting numbers are pretty great.
Shooting numbers are, like,
Looking,
okay,
I think
38% from 3 is, like, pretty solid, 4 attempts a game. Um, he, like, gets some rebounds, assists a little bit. I just don't see the star potential, and the fact that he keeps getting hurt scares me, in that, as you've seen with some players, once they get a big injury, they're kind of afraid of it happening again, and I think there's just, like, a mental toll that it takes on a guy. when he's injured as much as Gordon Hayward had, and I'm not blaming him. I mean, if I was in his situation and got offered 4 years, $120 million, like, for sure I'm taking it. There's no way he should be worth that much money, but I think this really stunts, Charlotte's growth. I mean, he's 30 right now, so he's gonna be 30 to 34, already on the downturn of his career. Hasn't shown to be worth that $30 million guy for at least 3 years. They're trying to build all these young players around him. Sure, he can mentor them, but I don't think a veteran mentorship is worth 30 million a year for 4 years. When there's a big free agency class next season. Granted, Charlotte's probably not gonna get any big free agents, so they kinda needed to do this. But I don't know. Charlotte just hasn't been shown to sign good players. I mean, Nick Batum, one of the worst contract signings. He was, like, supposed to be their big free agent guy. Um, and I think Gordon Hayward, sure, his stats will probably improve. He'll probably get higher usage, but for the quality of player that he is, I just really hate this for Charlotte. I don't know where else he would have gone. Indiana, I guess, on a sign and trade, but he was definitely going to go to one of these teams that is like trying to compete and take the next step while also not being that good. But I could be proven wrong. Who knows?
I mean, also that signing trade you mentioned also is a little interesting, where um it sounded like he was going to go to Indiana, sign and trade with Miles Turner and some other piece coming back for a while, and I I I saw some reports of the Pacers offering Miles Turner and Doug McDermott, and but Boston was looking for Miles Turner and one of Oladipo or TJ Warren, which is a very high price.
Yeah, that's too
And
much.
and then there was a bunch of reports about how they thought Aaron Holiday was an integral part of the deal. And then all of a sudden he just signs with Charlotte, which is kind of weird. And I I mean Boston clearly just gets nothing here. They clearly should have just traded with Indiana to get something for him. And I don't think I'm alone in thinking that of wanting Miles Turner to go sign with Boston. But there was also a lot of reports that Boston didn't ever want to keep Miles Turner. They're looking to trade him, and then they were looking for trade offers themselves, and the market on him was so bad that they didn't want him back. But still, they ended up just losing Hayward for nothing. And I guess with the contract, going off of what you said a little too, um, I don't disagree at all that it's a bad contract. I'm just I I'm intrigued by it. Like, it's by no means great. Plus, they also had to waive and stretch Nick Batum, so they're paying Hayward essentially. I mean, I guess having Hayward on the team is costing them nearly 40 million a year,
Yeah.
and he's not going to be a superstar. But I think he's a guy who can probably come in and average 20 and be the best player on this team, and certainly helps. I think he certainly helps them take a next step forward. But they're going to be a really fun team to watch for sure, and it'll be interesting. But I'm very intrigued by it.
Yeah, I don't know how much he actually helps them. I mean, last season, on what I thought was probably the second worst roster, I thought they really impressed. And I think a lot of that was due to just having a lot of younger players, more inexperienced players playing a key role. And I think that's something they still want to build towards. But now with Hayward, there's a whole lot of usage that's going to go to him. And he's going to be a really high usage guy, I expect. Like 28 to 30% would not surprise me at all, just given the playmakers on this team. And I think in a way that almost like stunts the growth of the players that they had. Like, nobody's gonna come in and kinda be forced to, like, take the next step like a Devonte Graham did, or like PJ Washington in his, second year won't be able to as much. And I don't know, maybe they win a few games, but, like, I honestly don't see this team improving that much even with Gordon Hayward. I liked him better without him. Toronto, was an interesting team. I thought don't see them contending for a championship with this team at all. Uh, Serge Ibaka is still okay, but I mean, he's 31 and definitely slowing down.
I mean, Serge
Uh,
Ibaka signed with the Clippers as well, so he's not there.
oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, he left too. Um, I guess that's just not updated to the roster I'm looking at right now. But yeah, with your key guy being Kyle Lowry at 34, I mean, Kyle Lowry is a great point guard, but I think he's limited a little bit with his age and size. Offensively, defensively, I really like Kyle Lowry. I mean, also limited by his size, but he does what he can. And Pascal Siakam doesn't wow me at all. He's definitely a solid player. And then Van Vliet is kind of a 3 and D type guy, a little bit, almost. I see his team getting. See, they were second last year. They're definitely falling behind a few teams this season. Um, I wouldn't expect them to host a playoff game. So I don't know. 4 years for Fred Van Vliet. You get him till he's 30. I would have preferred to just see them kind of let him walk or do a sign and trade even and use the cap in future years when they can kind of retool a little bit. I mean, I like Malachi Flynn. They drafted him,
Oh, I'm very high on Malachi Flynn.
but he doesn't seem to me as a great high ceiling
No,
guy.
he doesn't have a high ceiling, but
He's
I
a
think he
very
has a
high
really good floor.
floor guy. Um, which drafting guys like that are kind of you think trying to contend a little bit more, which there's no way this team I don't think this team can beat a healthy Heat team. I don't think they can beat a healthy Celtics team. They can't beat the Bucks. Well, depends on the Bucks fare in the playoffs. I don't think they can beat a healthy Brooklyn team. So I just like don't see how Van Vliet necessarily helps this team move in the right direction. Besides, uh, I mean, maybe the owner was pressuring them to like still stay competitive, but I mean, if I was the owner, they just won a finals. Nick Nurse is one of the best coaches. I think their GM is seen as one of the best GMs uh, for the risks he took that ended up in winning the finals and them still being competitive even as Kawhi left. So I don't think if they had a down year and some rebuilding, they would even be at risk of losing their jobs. As that can sometimes make teams make interesting picks. But I don't know. I thought Van Vliet was just going to leave and go get paid like to the Knicks was really where I saw him going.
Yeah, but I don't know if Pascal Siakam is really that number one option is the issue, where I think a lot of people are getting mad at him for that. But there could be a strong possibility that he takes another step forward. You never know. They brought in Aaron Baines to try to replace some of the impact Ibaka and Gasol leaving, which I really like Aaron Baines and think he'll do well. And they've always just had a lot of guys in the works who maybe will just be on their bench 1 year and then they come in and carve out a role where, I mean, Siakam was a late first round pick, didn't do much, and he really carved out a role for them in their championship run. Fred Van Vliet was just an undrafted free agent they brought in and slowly worked his way up to where he is now. Chris Boucher is certainly going to be getting a lot of minutes this next year. You saw Norman Powell break out last year for them a bit, and I mean they saw someone really young in Terrence Davis. I mean I've said what I think about him off the court, but on the court he's certainly a great prospect. And they have other guys like DeAndre Bembry, Stanley Johnson, who Patrick McCaw are all guys who, I mean, I guess you never know. I think if I've learned anything from the Raptors these last few years, I'm not going to count them out.
Yeah, that's true.
Just there's something about the team where these guys keep coming out. Your Van Vliets, your Siakam, your Powells. These guys that are on their team just keep coming out and performing. Where, I mean, I think that could have been said last year. No one thought they were going to compete once Kawhi was gone, and I think they walked into the playoffs with some. At least I think they at least had a solid chance of competing, and I don't see what's wrong with the Fred VanVleet signing at all. I mean, the Raptors are in a really weird spot because they're nearing that end of that window, and that's completely okay. They won their championship. They got what they wanted to do. But now you're at the point where I mean, Lowry's clearly aging. If Lowry really starts to take a drop off or moves on or something when his contract's up, Fred VanVleet can go in and take that spot. And I think you have another injection of talent coming in though, where I mean, Fred VanVleet as well is a guy who's in his mid-20s, just getting better. Same with Pascal Siakam. OG Anunoby is 23 now. He's getting better. They kind of have like their older talent with Gasol, Ibaka, and Leonard is gone from that championship. It's gone, but they have this new wave of talent that they had coming in, and they're only building upon that. They're not a young team. I don't think they really have any need to really blow the team up like maybe some other teams like I guess I'd say maybe the Orlando Magic I think should do. They certainly have pieces there to compete, and I'm not going to count them out. I think it's a great signing to bring him back.
Yeah, I suppose. I personally like to build a team where you sacrifice the future to win now, or if you're not realistically going to win now, it's better to focus on the future. And I think the championship window has passed for this team, that I think they can start to focus on the future. And I don't think bringing back a guy like Fred VanVleet is bad. It's more the length of the contract that gets me. I mean, I guess
He's not that old.
he'll be in his piece 26. Um, he'll hit his quote unquote peak in the middle of his contract, but I almost would have preferred to have them, I don't know, sign some type of veteran for maybe 1 or 2 years, uh, for similar money to use the money that way, and then kind of see how some of these younger players develop. But
I mean, he really fits the timeline of the
uh,
team
I
where this
suppose a little
current
bit.
team is at. I mean, you have Lowry, he's a little bit of an outlier, and Baines, but I mean, you have all those guys in their mid-20s with Van Vliet, Siakam, Boucher, Powell, and Anunoby's 23, and Terrence Davis is as well could be a piece for them going forward, and he's 23 as well. Where I mean, if you trade Van Vliet or something or Siakam, like you're no matter what, there's still just going to be some gaps in the timeline. But the core of this team is all in that timeline, that mid 26, where they still have room to improve, and they're starting to enter their primes. Where you never know what's gonna happen with them.
Yeah, it does fit, I guess, their timeline. I guess I'm just much lower on their new core of the team, um, minus Serge Ibaka, minus Marc Gasol, minus um, Kyle Lowry, because he'll be gone soon, probably after the season, unless he signs a cheap deal to stay. But I don't know. I mean, Malachi Flynn almost seems like a Fred VanVleet copycat to me a little bit,
Yeah,
uh,
there's
which
a
I
lot
find
of
kind of funny.
comparisons there,
So
but I mean, I love Van Vliet. I think
yeah,
I'd a
he's a
lot
good
higher
player.
him than
Don't get me
most.
wrong. He definitely deserved the money that he got. But I'm just really surprised it was Toronto that brought him back.
I guess also with that, you're saying you thought you'd go to New York. I wouldn't have been surprised there. New York did nothing really. They,
Yeah, I
I mean, they
think
signed Alec Burks, and they have all this cap space, and it's just looking like they're gearing up for another shot. All these big free agents in 2021, which did not work well for them last year.
yeah, I mean, I think the new front office there is very uh they were all like former agents, weren't they? Or worked for an agent company. Um I believe so. And I think they have a lot of sway in the league and maybe especially with those bigger players and maybe this season not really being a high big player free agency class, they decided to wait it out. Um Tom Thibodeau definitely wanted them to like get a lot of players and overpay for people and whatever, but uh he's not the GM, so he doesn't really get to say. But let's see, what
Yeah,
did they do? They
I mean
signed
they signed Alec Burks. I'm
Alec
not
Burks,
looking
one
at it,
year,
but
six
I think it's
million.
1 year, 5, 6. Yeah,
Uh,
they
Nerlens
traded.
Noel,
They
1 year,
basically,
5 million.
yeah. They brought Alfred Payton back as well, which I think was also around like 1 year, 5 million.
And Austin Rivers, 3 year, 10.
Year 10, um they basically got a second pick for taking on Ed Davis's contract, and then turned that into Jacob Evans, Amari Spellman, and another second round pick from Minnesota.
Right?
Where I kind of question, because like, I mean, they brought in a bunch of those, I mean, cheaper 1 year deals, but front office has seemed pretty open about weaponizing cap space, it sounds. And all they've really done are those two Ed Davis moves where, I mean, they basically got a second to take on Ed Davis's $5 million contract, and then they get pretty much similar cap holds in Minnesota for another second, and then two potentially young guys. Where, I mean, when they go out and talk about how they're weaponizing cap space, that doesn't seem like a whole lot to me. There could always be more there.
Yeah. I think
They
Oklahoma City kind of out weaponized their cap space and maybe the Knicks
Yeah,
were left with less desirable options and payouts.
I mean, this might be a bit of a shocker, but I think Sam Presti really likes to get his first round picks.
He certainly does. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the Knicks are just like waiting another year. I mean, it didn't even sound like they were even trying to like court free agents to their team.
No,
I
I mean,
heard
there
like
weren't really any big ones.
no, I mean, yeah, there weren't any big ones, but like there were no rumors of there was a lot of rumors of the Knicks are interested in this guy, they're interested in this guy, but I didn't hear
Yeah,
anything that was substantial. I mean,
I mean, they're
there's
they're pretty big in the Chris Paul rumors before he signed, and now they've been in some Russell Westbrook rumors since.
yeah, they got some Westbrook
Um,
rumors, there were Malik
the
Beasley
Rockets are
rumors.
imploding.
I'm sure they were looking at Van Vliet. Um I don't know, there's a lot of rumors, but, like, nothing it seemed like no team really, was or no player was really actually considering the Knicks. But,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
well,
sure they will try
it'll
to,
be interesting this
sign
year.
a guy next season, um, like a Giannis if Giannis doesn't resign, though it sounds like he will, or depending on Anthony Davis's contract, who that ends up being. I think then they'll make a push for some of these guys.
Thanks for listening this week. Please rate us 5 stars on your preferred podcast platform. This will help other listeners find our podcast. Next week, we will start our season previews for the teams. We'll do the Eastern Conference next week, where we will kind of make our predictions and ranking the teams 1 through 15 on where we think they'll finish, and maybe just quickly going into them and what we see happening. And then the week following, we will do the same for the Western Conference.
Yeah, then you can find all of our podcast episodes and links to all of the services we are on at anchor.fm/thehookshot. That should be in your description, as well as all the social medias on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So you can look in your description for those instead of me having to say it every week. We are also on Apple Podcasts, which I know is not listed on our website for some reason. I'm not totally sure, but you can also find us on Apple Podcasts. And we will see you next week.